We'll go ahead and get started. If you can go to the next slide, please. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Robert Flores. I am the chair of programs for the Inland Empire section of the APA. I would like to welcome you to our Lunch and Learn for the month. Today's topic is plan checking for planners. So this training is meant to be informative, but also interactive with several opportunities for you to participate if you so choose. We hope this training is useful and thank you again for joining us. Before we get into our program, I would like to start with our land acknowledgement. Next slide, please. Okay, my name is Robert Flores and I will begin by acknowledging that I am speaking from Moreno Valley in Riverside County, which is a traditional land of the Cahuilla people. Next slide, please. Okay, now let's find out who's online with us today. The following poll questions are intended to show us the makeup of today's attendees. Please take a few seconds to answer each question that will pop up on your screen. We will post the results after each question so everyone can see who's online. Go ahead and get the first poll question up.
Okay.
While we get that question up, I'll just go ahead and read the question and give you the option so that when it pops up, you're able to make the selection. We basically want to know who's online today, what your role is. You can either answer public planner, private planner, environmental planner, specialty planner, project manager, architect or engineer, developer, or someone else. And other. So as soon as that question comes up, we'll go ahead and give the option to answer that question. If you'd like, we can move on to the next portion of the presentation while you get the polls up and we can come back. Okay.
Why don't we do that?
Sounds good. Can we go to the panelist slide, please?
Sure.
Okay. Moving on, I would like to introduce our panelists for today's discussion. First, we have Kathleen Mitchell on the line. Kathleen is an Urban Regional Planner 3 for the County of Riverside. She comes to us with 5 years of experience in plan checking in the planning world. She does have her bachelor's degree from the UC San Diego and her master's in planning degree from USC. Kathleen comes to us with a range of experience in plan checking, which includes reviewing plans for layout, site layout, and architecture for approved tentative track maps to reviewing plans for different types of use permits and subdivisions as well. Next slide, please. Next, we have Rob Gonzalez. Rob is a senior planner with the city of Jurupa Valley. Rob comes to us with 8 years of experience in plan checking in the planning world. His education is he has his bachelor's degree in urban studies from UC San Diego and a master's in urban planning from UC Irvine. Rob has extensive experience with both ministerial and discretional commercial and residential reviews. Next slide, please. And there's myself. Like I said before, my name is Robert Flores. My day job is I'm a principal planner with the city of San Jacinto. I come to you with over 10 years of experience in plan checking in the planning world. And I received my bachelor's in urban and regional planning from Cal Poly Pomona with a minor in GIS. My experience ranges from smaller reviews to what I do now, which is reviews of large specific plans, subdivisions, commercial centers, and master plan communities. But I also have extensive experience reviewing proposals such as cannabis proposals, cell tower proposals, and even zoning reviews and things of that nature. At this point, should we go back to the polls and get that wrapped up?
Yeah, let me launch that now.
Okay, we'll go ahead and get started with the first poll. Like I said, we just want to know who's online. If you can answer that poll, you'll be able to see the results. And from what I see, we have mostly public planners on the line, which is great. Our presentation is really geared towards the public planners, but it can be useful for other folks as well. Okay. Yeah, it looks like we have mainly public planners based on the participation rate, and that's about 91% of you guys responded to that question. So we'll move on to the next poll question. The next poll question is your level of experience. We just want to know who's online. For those that are online, what's your level of experience? If you bear with us, we'll get that poll up. If you can just take a few seconds to answer that question, and we'll see what we have online. So we're getting close to almost 100% participation in that, and it looks like we're pretty even across the board. We have some folks with little to no experience and 1 to 3 years. We also have folks between 4 to 10 years. The main level of experience that we have online is the little to no experience and the 10 plus years. We have a full range of folks on the line. That's great. Thank you. And to the next poll question, and that is, what area do you work at? Where do you work? Basically the question. I myself know from registration who registered, but I want to see who's online. And it looks like most of the folks are from the Inland Empire, so that's great. Looks like we reached out to our section members and or section planners. But we do have some folks from LA County, Orange County. We also have some from other Southern California areas, some from other parts of the state, and a few people out there from outside of California. That's great. Looks like our workshop here reached many people. All right, moving on. Since we already did the panelists, we'll go on to the next section. If we can get the nuts and bolts slide up, please. All right. I hope that those poll questions keep you engaged. We have several more coming down the line, but for now, we'll go ahead and get into our presentation here. We'll get into the meat and potatoes of our training. Let's talk plan checks. This presentation is called Nuts and Bolts of Plan Check for Planners. Next slide, please. First, I want to talk about the different types of plan check that planners perform. As you probably know, planners are involved in many things, especially in smaller jurisdictions like the one that I work at. We are involved in planning and entitlement process, from the planning and entitlement process to the construction phase of a project, and even during pre-planning stages of projects as well. We have plan check at every level, from zoning reviews to subdivision, large projects for subdivisions and master plan communities or large commercial centers. And you may be checking plans for a pre-app one day and reviewing plans for a large residential tract map or a specific plan the next. Plan checks can differ between the different types of reviews. So each type of permit or review has its own unique aspects to it. So we hope to cover some of that here today. Next slide, please. Okay, so oftentimes we may ask ourselves, or our customers may ask us, what's the purpose of a plan check? Simply put, we as plan checkers are ensuring compliance to related requirements. Now, what I mean by that is that every project must comply with specific requirements. Every permit type has its own checklist. For example, you're not going to apply commercial requirements to residential requirements or vice versa. And you're not going to have cannabis regulations applied to a shopping mall. So we really, as planners, plan checkers in the planning world, have to know what requirements apply to what projects. However, our ultimate goal as public planners reviewing plans for development is protecting the health, safety, and welfare of our communities, right? So that's really what gives us the policing powers to do what we do. To that end, you want your projects to comply. So at the end of the day, you want to provide your applicants with a path forward, a path to compliance. Now, I'm not saying to do their job for them, but suggestions go a long way when you're doing plan checks and you provide your feedback. If you want to see better internal circulations within a shopping center, make that suggestion, make that comment, because the designer may not be thinking about that, but that may be a primary goal of your specific jurisdiction. It is up to the applicant design team to ultimately design what you're asking for or resolve the issue, but a suggestion goes a long way, and our comments are greatly appreciated from my experience. Next slide, please. Okay, now planners do much more than just review plans. As we all know, our role is multifaceted. Planners are usually project managers for planning projects and several types of permits, but we are also coordinators, mediators, collaborators. For that, we have to be generalists. We have to know a lot, right? We have to know what engineering is going to want, is going to need. We have to know what the fire department, we have to know what the water purveyors, some of the issues they're encountering, or some of the not our knowledge of requirements goes beyond land use and zoning. It goes beyond design. It goes beyond other CEQA and things of that nature. It goes beyond that. We have to be engineers when we have to take off one hat and put on the other. We have to know at least the basics of every other discipline that's involved in order to manage a project and be effective. But at the end of the day, one of our main jobs is to plan check the plans provided for the application as it relates to planning related items. We have to check the zoning, we have to check the layout of the site, make sure that it meets all the development standards and things of that nature. Next slide, please. As we may all know, and this cycle that's shown on the screen there, oftentimes projects go through many iterations of plan check in the plan check process, where the applicant submits an application, we review the application and the plans in this case, then provide feedbacks and comments, and then they turn around and revise the plan and resubmit and start the cycle all over again. And this will repeat until the application is deemed complete or the plans are acceptable to move forward in the process. This usually, from my experience, for at least for planning projects, the more extensive planning projects, you have several rounds of these checks that we go through. Sometimes I've seen as much as 10, 11 rounds, and that says a lot, but I've seen it, it's there. This is a period of a lot of communication, a period of a lot of coordination, a lot of review, a lot of planning, a lot of involvement and engagement from every agency that's involved along with the applicant. And with that, I'll go ahead and pass it on to my colleague, Kathleen Mitchell. She will take over the next few slides and give you some more information. Thank you.
Awesome, thanks. So I'm just going to delve into the three main project components that you'll be reviewing when you're looking at exhibits that applicants have submitted to you. And we'll start with the site plan. A site plan is your roadmap to best understanding the intent of the project you're reviewing. So if it's missing any critical information, such as not showing all proposed structures or uses on site, you and the other reviewing departments might get a little lost. So the following is the standard information that should be present on all plan types on your site plan. So you should clearly be able to tell the boundaries of the subject site, the dimensions of those boundaries, and the roadways that are adjacent to the property. This is especially important since those roadways are what will be utilized as access points to the property itself. Once you understand the bounds of the site, you'll need to understand what's going on within it, because these kinds of things can impact your project. This could be topography, because that can limit grading construction potential. This could also be natural features such as blue line streams that are state protected or habitat of protected sensitive species. Or you can be impacted by utility easements for electrical lines, stormwater drains, or cell towers. These are the kind of details that can make or break a project. So it's critical that you are able to identify them at the start of the project to avoid any setbacks later on in your processing. The last thing to check for is the actual proposed development features and corresponding site improvements, such as landscaping and parking, that the applicant is seeking to get approved. So whatever elements the applicant is looking to do on site needs to be on your site plan. And next slide. Next slide. Thank you, Rob. Some development projects will have unique elements that will add additional components to look for on your site plan. Oh no, sorry, one back. There you go. For example, in a large commercial center, it's critical that you can verify that parking standards are being met with number, placement, and dimensions of parking stalls, especially for ADA designated spaces. You'll also run into more specific requirements for things like lot coverage, floor area ratio, setback standards, and on-site circulation. Again, the clearer this exhibit is with these critical details, the more success you and your fellow reviewing departments will have in determining compliance with ordinance standards. Okay, now next one. So once you know where the proposed structures will be placed on the property, now you'll need to assess the structures themselves. So the standard information you're looking for when looking at elevations is a clear picture of the height and appearance of what will be built. There are likely to be multiple dimensions provided for the different stories of the structure, but usually the most critical for planning is from the foundation to the top of the roof line, because this allows you to determine compliance with height standards. You also want to get a feel for the aesthetics of the building, and the visual impacts the choices of exterior finishes such as siding, windows, doors, balconies, colors, and materials can all have on the street view. Not all elevations will be colored, but those that are black and white should be accompanied by a color and material board so that the planner can get a good idea of what the resulting building will actually look like. Next slide. Some elevations may have more restrictions that you'll have to evaluate for. For example, buildings in wine country have very specific design standards that must be evaluated in terms of appearance, number of habitable stories that are permitted, visibility of roof or ground mounted equipment, and what size and look signage is allowed to have. Elevations allow you to see what you're going to get when all is said and done with a project. Because of that, planners get the distinct pleasure of getting to be incredibly superficial. What's on the outside can often count far more for the public than what's on the inside. Plus, we should all be striving in many ways to make our communities better with each building we build. Next slide. Your last key exhibit to look for is the floor plan, as this gives you the best idea of the varying types of uses that will be on site, as well as the flow of operations that will be occurring within the proposed buildings. It should be clear what the sizes of each room will be, as well as the location of the corresponding doors, windows, and other access points that are integrated within those spaces. You should also have a clear understanding how accessibility is being accounted for as well. All of the fixed features, such as built-in cabinets, sales counters, cooking equipment, HVACs, elevators, staircases, etc., should also be shown. You don't want a floor plan that only shows the walls within a building. The floor plan is meant to give you a clear understanding of how the structure is to be used on the day-to-day. Next slide. So you'll find with some project types that you will lean very heavily on your floor plans for analyzing standard compliance. With cannabis projects, for example, there are limitations on square footage that can be dedicated to certain spaces, as well as requirements on how the public must be granted access into the sales floor where the product is. There are also strict standards for security, and having a well-made floor plan is critical to understanding how these levels of security work, especially for the most sensitive spaces, such as product storage, vaults, and delivery areas. While elevations paint you a pretty picture of what the public will see, floor plans are what give planners the clearest picture of how a project will actually operate. Next slide. So these aren't the only plans that you're going to come across as a planner. You're going to come across a wide array and diversity of plans, which is why you're so reliant on all the other departments that you're working alongside. So these can be things like landscape plans, grading plans, utility plans, any kind of thing that's happening on site that's needed for the operations, there's likely to be some kind of exhibit associated with it. And while you might not be the one directly providing corrections for these kinds of things because you're collaborating with other departments, you should still have a good understanding of what you're looking at, why it's important, and how the other departments are evaluating them. And then off to Rob.
Thank you, Kathleen. That was a really great section that you covered on the exhibits. And when you're doing planning, you're going to really want to hone down on the skills of reading those exhibits and being able to interpret them. One thing that you could do when you're reviewing those exhibits is that you could ask applicants to help you understand the plans a little bit better. So sometimes, like for parking, when Kathleen showed that commercial parking plan, there's all these parking spots, right? And so when you're doing plan checking, it could be hard to just count each one and to see which one, whether it's a compact space or whether it's a accessible space or whether it's a clean vehicle space or a charging space. So you could ask the applicant to help you by having them incorporate like some sort of table that kind of breaks down the numbers. And so that makes everyone's job a lot easier. But thank you, Kathleen and Robert, for covering those items. So my section is going to be about talking about the best practices for plan checking. This slide, we're going to cover just the best practices for plan checking. Obviously, from the get-go, you're going to want to familiarize yourself with your jurisdiction's regulations and also the issues. This could be at times a big challenge because as a plan checker, you're going to come across a variety of plans and a variety of uses. And every time that you receive a new plan, you may want to just open up your ordinance and take a look at what development standards they're going to have to meet. So for example, if you're reviewing a detached accessory structure, like a garage of some sort, there's some jurisdictions that have very specific development standards for that. At times, those development standards may be easy to understand. At times, there might be some gray area where you're not quite sure how to interpret some. So you may want to touch base with maybe a fellow planner or your manager or supervisor to see how a certain development standard is implemented. Or in situations where there's like gray area, you want to make sure that you analyze those situations very, very carefully and make the best finding from those. When you're reviewing plans, you're definitely going to review things according to the ordinances and the municipal codes that you have to review things by. There might be other policies in your city or county or jurisdiction that you're also going to have to take a look at as well. Okay, so when taking an assessment of plans, just keep that in mind. At times, it's good to keep track of checklists. So checklists make sure that you're very thorough, and they also help you make sure that you don't miss anything. Well, there's the ordinances and policies that you are taking a look at. You also want to get a feeling of what issues are important to your community. And so you really want to hone down on those items and make sure you don't miss them. So for example, let's say if your city is very careful on how trails are approved or how some other items are approved as well. You want to be careful on how you review those because at the staff level approval, you want to make sure that it's up to the standards of your city council, your supervisors, and those standards that have been voiced to you from upper management as well. So you want to make sure that you keep that in mind. But from the get-go, when you're reviewing your site plans and your project plans, you definitely want to take care of a couple of very first steps. You want to identify the scope of work. You want to compare the scope of work with the plans, make sure that everything is matching. If there's something that's not matching, you have to make sure that you make that a finding on your staff review letter. And in that staff review letter, you want to be very detailed on what you observed and any questions that you have so that they could clarify. So an example of a scope of work that may not match the plans would be maybe you receive a building plan check that says the project is a wall, but then you also see all these other structures that are being like proposed. Like there might be a difference there and you want to make sure that those things are clarified. So you also want to make sure that you identify the property correctly. The plans that we review may be drafted by people from a variety of experiences in the past. They could just be private property owners that, to the best of their abilities, just drew the site plan as best as they can. And they may have a lot of things that may be incorrect, but you definitely want to make sure that the property is correct. You want to make sure that the lot lines are being called out correctly and that the property itself is correct. Identifying that the property is correct is key because properties have zoning and land use that are attached to them. Not only that, but they may also have overlays as well. And so you want to make sure that you are working with correct information so that your plan check is correct as well. So from there, you could also ask critical questions about a plan. If they're showing a variety of things differently, you may want to ask, why is this being shown this way? And clear up any questions before that approval goes out. Okay, I already touched on using checklists. There's some jurisdictions that may already have checklists in place. And if there isn't, your jurisdiction could work into maybe developing a nice checklist. And these checklists could be per different uses, per different plans. And that would help you a lot just to make sure that the plans that are being approved all have this consistent information and all have like the best type of exhibit as possible. Best practice as well would be communicate efficiently. So earlier I mentioned writing that staff letter. So the staff letter is very key. Later on in the presentation, we're going to talk about what type of things go into your staff letter. But outside the staff letter, if you identify some things that could easily be cleared up with a simple phone call, I feel that has helped a lot in the past. So it's also enhanced the experience of the applicant to have that simple phone call and to clear up any simple questions ahead of time. You definitely want to make sure that you clear up anything that you can so that they don't have to go through unnecessary plan check reviews. Okay, it saves time and money, and your applicants will love you for that. Okay, and also it's very key that you document your findings. So you want to create a paper trail of any findings that you have so that you could identify how you worked with the plans. So plan check review letter, it's very important for you to just spend some time on developing good plan check review letters. You may want to run that by, if you're in a position where you have to run it by a manager, it's fine to do that. But essentially, a plan check review letter is issued by a planning department, and it should provide clear and detailed feedback to the applicant on the proposed development plans. Okay, it should outline steps that must be taken to address any deficiencies or areas of non-compliance, and they help ensure that the project meets all applicable requirements and helps facilitate the development process. The standard information that's going to go into your plan check review letter, your jurisdiction may have their own custom requirements. However, I always recommend these 7. So you want to make sure that you identify project information on that letter, review your findings, always make reference to the relevant municipal code sections, ordinances, or policies. This is key. So if your letter includes a couple of bulleted items indicating that they have to revise the height of a building. So you want to say, you want to write statements. That could be a simple bullet point, but you want to write a statement that says the observed height of the proposed building is 25 feet. The maximum height per section, blah, 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 is 20 feet. And please revise plans to meet the requirements. And that would help, making that reference would help the applicant identify which section is being quoted and how they have to revise their plans. If they want to continue, you also have to anticipate what their options would be at that point. So if they want to maintain a higher height, they're possibly looking at a variance. You could wait to have that conversation with them later once they kind of voice to you that you really want to move forward with a higher height. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Part of the process of writing these plan check review letters is thinking 5 steps ahead. And so you have to think, how is the applicant going to respond to this comment? And what type of questions I could anticipate. So just keep that in mind. Let's see, we were at review, corrections, and modifications, required corrections and modifications. So you want to include clear direction in your letter. Also, additional information requirements. So if they need to provide additional reports to you, you want to include that in your letter. Include your contact information. That's very important. So you want to make sure that they're able to reach out to you and ask you questions. And then also provide deadlines as well. Okay, so deadlines help people make progress on their plans. Okay, some tips on letters. The first review letter, I always recommend that you take more time on that. You want to be very thorough. And the reason behind that is that you want to catch as many things ahead of time as you can. So you want to catch everything that you can. This helps build trust, I think. Like, it helps people get the feeling that you're not adding things afterwards. So let's say if you could always add something afterwards, right? But if you add a major comment, like on the fourth plan check review, they may just have this feeling that something wasn't told to them ahead of time. And usually it creates a bad experience for them. And now, like, if you have to, I mean, you have to, it's just part of the job. Perhaps something was missed on the first review, but try to avoid those situations where you add something significant to the end. So that's why I always recommend do as best of a job as possible on the first review, so that nothing gets caught later. And so this also helps people not feel that the goalpost is being moved on them. So just keep that in mind. And also, it's a good idea to really spend time on the first plan check review, because most likely the second, third, and fourth reviews are going to be based off of that first review. And it just saves time. You might be the person that does that second, third review, or maybe another planner is the one that's doing that review once you get a job as a director somewhere. And you never know. So I might be doing the first review, but then maybe Robert does a second, or Kathleen does her fourth. And so at those situations, I want to make sure Kathleen doesn't think, what was Rob thinking? So just try to do as complete of a job as possible. Okay. Try to remove red tape. As working for a local government, like, we have our systems, right? And people we have to guide people through that process. So within your abilities, try to remove red tape and try to work with people to get those items resolved as well. Okay. So also, next item, before the letter goes out, double check the big ticket items. And so these would be the items that could be costly for the applicants to fix. And these might be items that could possibly end the project. And so before issuing those major comments, you want to make sure that you do your due diligence, make sure that you double check those items, because you can anticipate there's going to be many questions about them, and they may want to have a discussion on what options they have at that point. Another tip is develop standard language. Some of the items that we may issue could be standard comments. Standard comments such as, you're going to have to pay development impact fees, or something else like that. And so as you do more plan checks, it's a good idea for you to develop these standard comments and issue them. They help save time. And with these plan check reviews, sometimes time is money. And so your applicants would really appreciate you not having to reinvent the wheel for each comment. Save all your letters. So save them in a place that is accessible for all people in your office. And I'm pretty sure that your jurisdictions are going to have like a shared folder where you save something, but you want to make sure that your plan checks are labeled correctly and that they're easy to find in that shared folder. And finally, another tip on plan checks is know how to identify struggling applicants. And so earlier, Robert mentioned there might be that applicant that's on the 10th review. And so you may ask yourself, why is this person on the 10th review? Like, what's happening? And in those situations, you may want to maybe look into what's keeping it from moving forward. So you might provide some dedicated assistance to those people, provide more meaningful feedback or longer feedback, and then also try to collaborate with them. The people that we work with, they may be someone that doesn't deal with site plans a lot. And so in those mom and pop situations, you may want to reach out to them and see and explain to them why something is required. And in other situations, you just want to find ways to avoid that plan check getting into that 10th or 11th plan check. And usually those plan checks at that level of plan checks, it's going to start raising questions like what's happening, why are they not developing properly? And at that point, it becomes more of an issue of how do we get these people what they need to get approved. But essentially, that's my segment, and it looks like we have test your knowledge. And
Actually, Rob, thank you very much for that. And thank you, Kathleen, for all that information. We hope you can digest it and have some good questions for us later on. I want to take a step back before we get into those poll questions, Rob. I want to apologize first and foremost. I woke up today and I was feeling a little bit ill, and I'm trying to get through this. I apologize. And then we got a little bit sidetracked with the polling questions. I think we missed some slides. If we can go back to the agenda, I just wanted to share that even though we're already deep into the presentation, so we can all understand how this is going to continue and wrap up. As you just realized, we just presented to you the information that we had on plan checking. And then now, after a few poll questions, we're going to get into our panel discussion where we're going to give you some more information for you to digest. And then at the end of the panel discussion, we are going to be providing opportunity for question and answer with us, the panelists. And we're going to close the presentation with a survey, and we'll be available at the end for the questioning. So I just wanted to provide that so that everybody can understand the way this is going to occur moving forward. If you go to the next slide, Rob, we missed one of the polls that was supposed to occur, the poll questions that was supposed to occur earlier on. So I actually want to take a step back and do poll question number 4. And really the purpose of this was to keep you engaged and provide you the opportunity to learn more before we got into some of the information. But since we're done with it, I still want to engage what you guys think about this question. So what's the most common plan that you'll see in a project application that you should see in every application, at least planning projects? Go ahead and give a few seconds. It looks like everybody's spot on and everybody knows what that plan is. Okay, it looks like we have 100% answer rate. So yes, it is the site plan. The site plan is one of the most important plans that you'll see in your application that tells you overall what's going on the property. Obviously, elevations, floor plans, and all those other plans are important to tell you, to fully tell the story, but the site plan really tells you exactly what you need to know, and it's very important for our review. But there were a couple of you that said grading plan. Yes, definitely on the technical side, grading is important. And some said floor plan, and those are important for us to know, like Kathleen says, how the operation is going to function. But I would say that the site plan is probably the most important. So thank you for taking that poll. We'll go ahead and move on to the poll section that we ended up on, if you don't mind. And that is poll question number 5. Okay. And right now, what we're trying to do is we're trying to test your knowledge. I know that our presentation is mainly focused on planning reviews, very little on zoning reviews or business license site plan reviews and things of that nature. It's more on entitlements. But really, this question goes to that aspect of our jobs. And what does the Permit Streamlining Act apply to, or does the Permit Streamlining Act apply to a planning review of a building permit? No, we didn't talk too much about that, but that is something we do as well. whether it's reviewing the plans for a building permit from an entitlement project that you worked on in order to ensure condition compliance and ensure that it's built the way it was approved, or if it's just a building permit review for something that didn't require an entitlement. Does the Permit Streamlining Act apply to that? And for those that don't know, the Permit Streamlining Act is really the rules and regs on how we should process certain types of permits. It's statutory law and something we should all know. And it looks like everybody answered, and about 61% of you said yes, and 39% of you said no. And I can tell you that the Permit Streamlining Act does not apply to building permit reviews, and that is for the simple fact that it is a ministerial permit, and it's something that is not discretionary. And the Permit Streamlining Act, my understanding, is mainly for discretionary development projects. So although it is for development projects, it's ministerial. So oftentimes your jurisdiction does have policies where they set a goal or standard of how long it should take for you to review those plans and turn those back to the applicant with any plan check comments. But the Permit Streamlining Act is really focused on planning entitlements and permits. Okay, we'll move on to the next question. And that is question number 6. So does the Permit Streamlining Act apply to planning reviews of specific plans? Okay, looks like we have 100% participation, and 62% of you said yes, and 40%, oh, just changed, 60 yes, 40% no. From my understanding, the Permit Streamlining Act does not apply to reviews of specific plan, and it's for the simple fact that is actually a legislative action. Specific plans are normally approved or adopted by way of an ordinance or a resolution, and it is somewhat of a hybrid between it's a combination of a general plan and zoning code all in one for a specific geographical area. So it is adopted by a legislative action, and the Permit Streamlining Act, my understanding, does not apply to that. However, these two don't apply to the Permit Streamlining Act does not apply to either one of these two, but it's a matter of good practice, at least from my point of view. I like to treat all reviews that are under my review in the same manner, with the exception of the building permit, because that usually is a much quicker process. But for all entitlements and permits that we process, request applications that we receive in the planning world, on the public sector, we like to keep it on that same track so that we don't have to keep remembering what is applicable and what is not. So I apply the 30-day review period for completeness to all applications that I review. I think we have one more question. I hope this engagement is helpful and it keeps you involved. Our last question, our last poll question is, how many days do you have to review plans for CUP and determine if it's complete? Okay, looks like we're almost there. It looks like it stopped. So 12% of you said 90 days and 82% of you said 30 days. I'm guessing that the experienced planners online are the ones that said 30 days, or for those that are already in the mix of reviewing plans for in planning. But yes, the correct answer is 30 days. When an application is submitted, it usually starts the clock under the Permit Streamlining Act, and we're required on the public side to return comments to the applicant or responses to our review to the applicant, whether that's your review is complete and needs no further attention, which usually doesn't happen at the first time, or if it's these are your comments, these are the corrections, this is what you need to change and update and do. We need to do that within the first 30 days. And then you start that cycle that I discussed at the very beginning, where they make the changes, they resubmit, and then it starts that cycle back again. So your clock, your 30 days start every time they resubmit their plans or application. All right, we'll move on. Now we're going to get into a fun part of our session today, and that's our panel discussion. Our panelists are going to join me. The other two panelists are going to join me, and we're going to have several questions that we're going to go through and answer and discuss, and hopefully that provides you more information and it creates more questions in your mind for later on in this presentation. The first question is, What are some challenges you've experienced during the plan check process? Please share some possible solutions or ways you handle this challenge or these challenges. We'll go ahead and start with Kathleen and then go from there.
You'll come across many challenges when you're going through the plan check process. Probably the one that most often comes up for me, at least, is miscommunication. So when you're trying to discuss either your correction letter or meeting times or anything like that with your applicant and potentially their consultants, there might be miscommunication between you and the applicant and their consultant, and or their architect or their engineer, or whatever it may be. And so that can cause a lot of issues because you're not fully in control of what the applicant's team is doing or saying or working on. And sometimes there's miscommunication internally too between departments. So you'll get a correction from transportation that now completely impacts, environmental health or flood or someone else. And so now they are at odds at one another with a correction that they've given. And so it's, when we talk about being an air traffic controller, just trying to keep everybody together as a unit, the biggest thing that you're going to be doing is fixing those communication errors. So always be available for your applicant for clarifying any questions that they have. Make it abundantly clear to them that they are welcome to call or email at any time. If they give you the contact of their engineer and their architect, but you also have the contact of the property owner or applicant, always keep them looped in, always keep them involved. So they might not be directly involved in making the corrections on the site plans or anything, but they are the person that is hopefully going to get the entitlement at the end of the line, and they deserve to know what's going on with their project since it's their money paying for it. So just always keep them looped in if you can. And then if you see discrepancies or issues between departments, if you see a big correction from transportation, hopefully with time and experience, you're going to be like, oh, I think this might impact someone else. And you put everyone in the same email, same room, same meeting, so that they can work out amongst themselves how to rectify the issue and meet everyone's standards. So it's just noticing where those falls are about to be in your communication and stopping them before they start, or fixing them once they have, as quickly as possible.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I totally agree. Communication is key, and lack of communication can get you into real big problems through the process. So I think that's a great suggestion. Rob?
Yeah, thank you, Kathleen. That was a really good addition. So I think one of those things, if I were to piggyback off Kathleen, is the communication is very important. And you have to try to document that communication. Do it however best way you feel it can help you and also your organization. So if your organization has a permit management system, add notes to that. And so that you want to include sufficient detail so that whenever someone that is not aware of the project looks at the case file, they know what is happening with the case. It takes some effort, but make notes and write everything down. And if you do that, the present you will appreciate, the future you will appreciate the present you. I think I said that right. Yeah, but you get the idea. But there's going to be appreciation if you do it right. But let's see, some of the challenges that I experience as well is that sometimes you may receive a plan check for like a code enforcement issue. And so code enforcement issues become very complicated because usually, or there might be a party that is not 100%, like they're not cooperating 100%, or they may submit plans just to submit plans. And you have to issue corrections, and that might be their strategy just to draw out time. When working with code enforcement issues, you want to make sure that you have good communication with code enforcement to see what's happening, because usually there's a lot of history with those cases, and And in those situations, planning and code enforcement should be working hand in hand with each other to resolve those issues.
And those are two great suggestions. And yeah, I think documentation is very important. If you don't have a permit tracking system or a land tracking system, email is my best friend. I hardly use my phone unless I have to, unless it's a scheduled call or anything like that, because if I email somebody something, I can always save that email in that shared platform that we usually have in our jurisdictions, so that if I'm not there, somebody else can see what was said. And oftentimes, when somebody comes to me after the fact, when another planner may not be there any longer and says, "This is what that planner says," I said, "Give me an email. Show me an email. Show me something in writing that they said that. I can't just take your word for it." But also documentation in a sense, since this is a training on plan checking. You want to be careful in providing informal comments or suggestions for changes to your plan check, to your applicant about the plans. Because they'll get to work right away. They want to get their project process quickly. So they'll start making changes when that is just an informal suggestion and it doesn't make it onto your comment letter or it changes in some way. So just, I know that we get updates or emails or calls every once in a while to see what the status of our review is. Just give them a status of when you anticipate to have it, but make your comments formally, officially on your comment letter or on the plan check, on the plans themselves, if it's just a simple plan check, and provide all comments at one time. That just avoids a lot of hassle and miscommunication, going back to what Kathleen said earlier on. Great. That is great. One suggestion, if I may add, just to wrap this one up, or one challenge, I should say, is what I said earlier. As planners, we are expected, actually, I think, to know everything and anything that has to do with the planning process and development and things of that nature. We have to know what the engineers in our jurisdiction are going to ask for. We have to know what the fire department's going to ask for. We have to know what the jurisdictional issues are with maybe flooding or fire hazard or things of that nature. We have to know what our water purveyors, if it's not the jurisdiction, what they like to see, what they don't like to see. We have to know all the rules and regulations for WQMP, for example, for other things. And so I think that's a challenge because our brain can only hold so much, right? And we know what the zoning is. We may know what the zoning is or what the policies are for land use and development, but we don't know all the requirements for other disciplines. But my suggestion is at least know the bare minimum to make you sound smart, to get you by. And you'll learn as you go. I learned every day. I've been doing this for over a decade, and every day I learn something new. Keep learning and just apply it as best as you can. Okay, we'll move on to the next final question. And I can appreciate all the questions that are coming in on the chat. We will give you an opportunity to ask those questions as soon as we're done with this discussion. All right, question number 2. What are some ways you improved your plan check process throughout the years? What are some best practices you can share, which may even alleviate some challenges? Rob, we'll go ahead and get started with you first.
Sure. I think creating checklists is key. That helps make sure that you're doing a consistent job at reviewing things. Yeah.
Great. I think that's one of our questions
Mhm.
later on to touch on, but yeah, that's a good suggestion. That helps guide you. I appreciate that. Kathleen? I'm sorry. Is that me? I'm next. I'm sorry. I'll keep us on track. I apologize for that. Throughout the years, what I've come to realize, and one of the things I learned at the very beginning when I was being taught when I first started my career was, like I said earlier, you have to know a lot. We're generalists. We have to know other aspects of the development process, but you don't have to know everything. And the reason I say that is we have, for example, in my jurisdiction, we have a development code that's over 600 pages long. I don't know everything that's in there. I learn as I go, right? But the one tip that I can give you is You don't need to know what's in the development code and the general plan. You'll learn that as you go. But the one tip is know where to find that information. Know where to go. Somebody's asking you what's the height for a certain structure in a certain zone. Know where to find that in the development code, right? Or in your ordinances. If somebody's asking you what the road classification is for a certain road, although that's more of an engineering public works situation, we deal with it a lot. You don't have to know it, but know where to find it so you can provide that information, or so you can put it in your review letters and apply it to your plan check. Know where to find it and use it and learn as you go. Kathleen, sorry.
Now it's me. No worries. My big thing for anyone, especially the people who are just starting out in planning, never work in a vacuum. Never sit at your desk and stare at something and ponder, what could this be? Go get an answer. Meet people where they are. Shooting emails and phone calls are really easy to do because you don't have to get up. But Rob and Robert can both attest to this because we work together. I will accost people in their spaces. I will go right in and I would just say, hello, I am Kathleen. I need this answer. And it allowed me to meet a lot of incredible people at the county that I work at in all departments, not just planning. So it really is your greatest strength and asset is your staff. And there's people that you're working with that have been in planning for so long that they will just know the answer off the top of their head, or they can walk you through something, or you can go back and forth with one another, say, hey, I think it's this, and this is why. And they can tell you, yeah, that's a great idea. Let's expand on that. So in those kinds of conversations and meetings, you're actually going to end up improving the plan check process just naturally because you're having those conversations and you're meeting people where they are. So just always rely on the people that you work with and meet them where they are. Don't get off your butt and go into their office and say hi.
Get your steps in. Right? Get your steps in.
Get
You
your
know, and
steps
that,
in.
yeah, and that can be somewhat hard in an environment like Kathleen's. At you have multiple stories of people that work there that you work with, and you have to go.
Hundreds and hundreds of people, but yeah,
In
it's
my
still
office,
possible.
yeah, in my
Yeah,
office, it's a hop, skip, and a jump, and I get to the engineer,
That's
right?
I think
It
the
just varies,
challenging,
but yes, I think that's a great suggestion. Get to know those people that you work with. Don't just know them by email or by phone. Put a face to it and have those discussions, or even go just down the next to the next cubicle, 3 cubicles away. Talk to your manager, talk to your fellow planners, and bounce things off of them.
Mhm.
Sometimes that's helpful to if you're on the fence on something, they can shed some light, like Kathleen said, with some experienced planners, they can provide
Exactly.
guidance or an exact answer on something you're taking longer to try to determine. So
yeah, and I just wanted to add that when you ask questions, sometimes like with the things that we deal with, you have to identify or outline the fact pattern on certain things because like a simple question asked a certain way could be an incomplete answer. So you just have to find ways to ask your questions critically. Yeah.
okay, thank you, Rob.
Mhm.
We'll go ahead and go to the last panel question, and that is, can you, if you can please give the planners online, especially those with less experience in the process, one main tip or caution for plan checking. We've discussed many already, or even for processing projects. What would that be? And I'll go ahead and kick that off and just throw off. Like I said, one of the main things that I haven't discussed, we've already said so many, so I won't touch on those. One of the main things that we haven't discussed much, or at least I don't remember hearing, is time management. Time management is key for our work. We have deadlines, we have timelines, we have things we need to do by a certain point to get to the next point. So, with that, one of the biggest things you want to do is learn how to manage your time. Sometimes I'm in a situation where I always have something to do, right? But I'm in a situation where most of my applications and plans and projects are out. I completed all my review and I'm waiting for resubmittal or new projects. I'm working on other stuff that I need to do. But sometimes there's situations where 10 out of my 40, 50, 60 projects that I have on my list come in at the same time. And I only have 30 days to review all 10 of those. It varies from time to time, but if you learn how to manage your time, what I do like to do is at the very beginning of the week, I like to create my to-do list, like look at my calendar and see what I have going on as far as meetings for my projects, what I have even the following week that I need to prepare for, make my list, carry over from the last week things I didn't get done. And then that way I know what I need to get done along with all my reviews, and I can manage my time, and you don't get into a situation where you have so many meetings, you have so many reviews that are due tomorrow, and you can't do everything, right? You only have two hands, you have limited time. So managing your time is probably the best thing you can do when you're talking about plan checking and processing projects in the world. We'll go to Kathleen.
Awesome. So if you're working in the public sector, or even if you're working in the private sector, cities and counties and all these jurisdictions have been around for a very long time. So somewhere in some system or some box, if you still have paper files or something in your offices, which we do, there's been a case that's similar to the one that you're working on. So I've seen a lot of questions about checklists, and if we don't have one, or conditions of approval or things like that, your history of your jurisdiction will have a project very similar to probably what you're working on. So if you can find that, you can use that as a template and create your own checklist or your own conditions that make sense. But also it can help you in correction letters too. I was telling Rob that I still use correction letters he wrote when he was with the county, because he was so good and so thorough, and I liked the way that he laid things out, and it made it very clear and easy to read. So I still steal his format for his correction letters even today. So there's someone that did something similar that's going to be able to help you. So if you just do a little research, do a little digging, you can find something and that will help you out. If you can't find something, find a planner that has a lot of experience or is a more senior planner in your office, because maybe they worked somewhere else that had something similar as well, and they can give you some guidance on what conditions you should be putting on, what should you be looking for. Is this elevation okay? Does this floor plan make sense? They're going to be able to provide you more context on that if you can't find a more concrete example from your jurisdiction's history. So just use what you have. Don't do more work than you need to. Work smarter, not harder.
Exactly. Yeah, I love that. Don't recreate the wheel. Nothing's new under the sun. It's probably already been done, like Kathleen said. If not in your jurisdiction, at least somewhere else, and somebody can help you get there. Like I said, you're not gonna know everything, and you probably haven't done everything, but you can find somebody or some type of guidance in your jurisdiction. So, and last but not least, Rob.
Sure, thank you. So I think if I were to give suggestions to someone that is just starting off, I would say just think about how to really enhance the applicant's experience, like whether that be through a phone call or through an email, or whether just asking them quick questions about their plans. I feel that many times people submit their plans to cities or to counties, and they have this impression that we're going to issue all these corrections and that's it. And they're left with only this paper that that they have no guidance on. And if you could think of ways to just make that experience a little bit more personable, that would help out a lot. Not only will it help set the tone for your applicants, but it'll also help set the tone for your organization. So generally, we want our organizations to be approachable. We want applicants to feel that they could ask us questions and get the answers and the approvals that they need accordingly. Just think of ways to just improve on that. And every person is different. I, for example, like to just maybe give them a call. And if I see something curious on their plans, I like to talk to them about what they're doing, what they are seeking, what their goals are, and help them get where they need to be. And so sometimes like a plan check review letter will indicate, oh, you need to apply for a separate permit or you need something else. And so giving it that personal touch will help applicants feel like they know where they're going. And so you want to make sure that you give them that feeling that they know where they're going and that they see the finish line. Otherwise, they may feel that they're just treading water and they're not getting anywhere. So just those small things, if you could think of how to incorporate them, would go a long way.
Yeah, that's right. Keep in mind, we are the face of our jurisdictions. We are the
Mhm.
person that they attribute to our jurisdiction. Not only do we want to be business friendly and we want to bring development, appropriate development to our jurisdictions, but we want to make sure that we give a good taste in their mouth as it pertains to processing the project. Thanks, Rob. I appreciate that. So now we're at that point. Before I get there, Rob, Kathleen, thank you very much for joining me. I appreciate it. That was a great discussion. Thank you for all the information and for being willing to participate in this training. And now we're going to get into that part of our session where we're going to give you the opportunity to ask us questions, either us or even amongst yourselves, if we do not have an answer. This is more of a roundtable type discussion. We'll go ahead and open it up. If you'd like to we'll start with the questions in the chat, and then we will also open up for you to verbally ask us the questions if you want. If you can just raise your hand so that our team can identify you and allow you to speak. But while we get that going, we'll go ahead and go to the questions we have. We'll start with the chat. We have both questions in the chat and the Q&A option. And I think at the very beginning, I saw the question for Rob and Kathleen, if possible, are there any documents or books you would recommend to help teach new planners how to plan check? Also, are there any available templates for a plan review checklist that have worked best for you and your jurisdiction that could be shared?
Yeah, I think a lot of the questions that I'm seeing in there is asking for a template on the checklist. I know for County of Riverside, we use, if you go to our forms and applications on our planning department website, they have checklists that they've created for the applicants. But what actually ends up happening is the planners use those same checklists to verify that information is present on the plans. So maybe your jurisdiction has similar forms for applicants that you can actually end up making a pseudo checklist for yourself of things to look for. The other thing would be is just figuring out what the standard information each plan has, like what we were talking about earlier with the site plans, floor plans and things. But then what's unique to what you're working on you're never going to have a checklist that's going to cover everything. So whenever you have a unique situation, just building checklists specific to that. So if you do a lot of cannabis projects, build a checklist for cannabis. If you do wineries, do one for wineries. That's just what I tend to work on most. So that's why I bring it up. But you can create your own as you go, as you're learning more of like, what should we be looking for that's specific. But the way to make a checklist is using your ordinance. So what we're checking for is that the plans are meeting the land use standards and the zoning classification standards if you have them separated that way through general plan and a zoning ordinance. That's what your checklist is. So you can create one from just knowing or understanding how to read your ordinances. And that's where those standards are primarily coming from.
Yeah, that's a good point. Using the ordinances or the code and the general plan to create a checklist if you don't have that. But like I said earlier, recreating the wheel is often not the most efficient. What I would do is if my jurisdiction doesn't have a checklist, which it does, I would look out to nearby jurisdictions. Maybe it's the best option because they're the same geographical area and might have the same issues. I look at see if they have checklists. Like Kathleen says, the county has a host of checklists for every type of application they could have. May not be the same application, but you could steal from them. It's all public information, and this is not going to be an issue. But you can use those checklists to create your own if you don't have one. But definitely look to see if your jurisdiction has that checklist, or just reach out to other agencies or create your own. It's a good point. And as far as the book is concerned, I don't have one specific book. I have read books that mention the plan check process, and I can We could probably provide that list, a list of books after the fact to those that registered. But several of the books, the different types of books I have in my office that we often use are books that speak to the different types of architecture and design there is. We're not experts. Like I said, we just do what we can to and apply the standards and the regulations. But books can help you identify the different types of architecture, the different types of language and terminology that's used. There's books that speak to the different types of hazards and conditions that you could address, and things that speak about development code and land use and zoning. There's a host of books, and I'll try to get my list together and see if we can send that out. Rob, did you have anything to add to that?
Oh yeah, definitely. If your jurisdiction is thinking of maybe formalizing their checklist, I think that's really great. Not only as like for staff, but you can also provide that checklist to applicants. And applicants like that, they're going into the process and they could themselves do a self-assessment and see how they're doing. I always recommend that they do that. And now that might raise more questions, but that's part of the conversation. But checklists are really important. The county has a good list. And I think here in the city, we also have a list as well.
Great. Okay, so let me see. Go finishing off. Do we happen to have anybody that raised their hand that wants to verbally ask us a question? Okay, we'll move on. One of the questions I've seen is, what is the process like when an applicant requests a variance? Variances are fun, aren't they?
Yeah, there was a couple questions about variances. I'm like, oh God, I'm sorry for if that's what you're working on.
Yeah.
I think I brought up the subject of variances, so that might be my doing.
Yeah,
So,
it was.
Okay. Variances are fun, right? I mean, variances. The only thing I can say
Mm.
about a variance is that it's a tool. It's a tool in
Yeah.
our toolbox that we can use to make things happen if they're appropriate.
And your
But just like
findings are going to be really specific to your jurisdiction, right? Are
yeah,
they the same across the board? I feel like they're not.
there's specific requirements for state law, but yeah, they vary by jurisdiction. I've seen just like a tool in your toolbox. A hammer doesn't unscrew a nail. A screwdriver doesn't hammer a nail, and things of that nature, or vice versa. Sorry, variance is appropriate when it's appropriate. What I like to do is I try to have that in my back pocket, but not really use it as a first resort, and not use it at all if I don't have to. You want to try to comply to the standards, but a variance basically does not take away from the uses in a zone, does not increase or decrease density. What it does is it allows you to deviate or vary from development standards. Sometimes it's necessary, but it has to be a very unique situation. One of the best examples I like to use is like a triangular shaped lot. How can they meet certain setbacks if the shape of the lot is prohibiting them? And what the variance says is that you want to give everybody the same treatment or the same opportunity to meet certain standards, and in that case, they don't have that, so you have a justification to vary. But the way a variance works is usually that requires a public hearing, and that is something that goes to either the planning commission or one of the decision-making bodies that holds a public hearing. Usually is not at a staff level unless it's a minor variance I've seen out there, or minor setback adjustments and things of that nature. So the variance is similar to any other entitlement. You receive an application, and the plan should show what they're trying to develop or build, and the variance request should say what specific standard it's going to vary, they're requesting to vary from, and why. And what I like to do is I like to go through the same process as I do with everything else and do my plan check and provide my comments. But also one of the unique comments that I provide with a variance is, give me those findings. Here are the findings that my code requires me to make. The burden is on you. You want this variance, give me the findings. So when they resubmit the application, they have to resubmit a justification. And if you support it, you move forward. If you don't, you can either help them make better findings, or you can say we cannot support that request.
Robert, I don't know if you want to end on, there was a hand raised, so I don't know if you want to end on like one verbal question since we're almost running out of time.
Yes.
But Krista Mason raised her hand, so if you would like, I could allow her to speak.
Yes, please.
Okay. I don't know if Krista, are you able to just talk, or do we have to give you permissions?
I think we
I
should be
think,
able to give her permission.
yeah, we're gonna ask to unmute, and then Krista, if you could just unmute yourself.
And while she does that, I just want to let everybody know all the questions we received in the chat. We'll try to get those from the Zoom, and we'll send out responses to those if we didn't answer them. And we'll wrap everything up about 2-3 minutes before so we can close things up. Krista?
Krista?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
loud and
Hi,
clear.
everyone. And thank you. This presentation was wonderful and it's greatly appreciated. Actually, my question was answered during the discussion and I meant to lower my hand. So thank
Never
you.
mind.
No problem. That's great. We'll
Does anyone else have one last question maybe for before we close
there
out?
there was a good one in the Q&A too, in
Okay.
case we don't one.
Go ahead.
There's more than a few now. Does the 30-day rule of the CUP apply to the second and third round of submittals? Yes, that 30-day restarts every time they resubmit.
I like the red tape one that's right under that one. That's really a great
There's
question.
a red tape one.
Yeah, it says Rob suggested cutting red tape. What is the panelist philosophy on this? What are the areas where we can make changes, and what are those things that are fixed?
Rob?
I think in terms of when I made a comment about trying to reduce red tape, we all work in bureaucracies, right? And sometimes we have to make sure that we maintain the structure that our bureaus have, right? So we have to work within the box in some instance. But there, as you do plan checking, you're going to notice that there's opportunities where you can make the process a little bit more streamlined for the applicant. And so that's the suggestion that I had. And it could vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. But generally, my suggestion is to try to reduce the number of plan checks. If something could be cleared up with a telephone call to the applicant, that's great. But we definitely want to make sure that we adhere to like the integrity of our bureaus. And our process is there for a reason. But we want to make the process as easy as possible for the applicants.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add to that is at this point in my career, I didn't think I was going to be learning something like this, but I'm at a jurisdiction that really likes to be business friendly, development friendly, and likes to ensure that we bring in the appropriate development for our residents and our community. And the reason I say I'm learning this late in the day is because late in my career is because early in my career, I was always taught there has to be multiple iterations of a review. They cannot get it perfect. We have to make sure we catch everything. We can't miss anything. And to me, that's putting up a red flag instead of being with that mentality of, I'm going to get you. I'm going to get you. I'm going to find what you did wrong or how you're not complying. Rather than doing that is have the mentality of, how can I get you to a hearing the fastest way? What do I do? Do I give you specific comments that you need to change so that there's no question about it? Do I meet with you after I issue the comments and clarify any questions you have? Do I take the initiative to help you and guide you along the way? It's not our job, guys, but it is our job to ensure that what we're trying to relate to the applicant is received and is addressed. Sometimes they don't address something not because they don't want to, but because they don't understand what the request is. So
And I just want to say one quick thing to close out is that I don't know where I heard this, but I heard it from somewhere, but people have an option to go to different businesses if a business that they like isn't giving them the service that they want. If they don't like the food that they got in a place, they don't have to go back to that restaurant. They could go to any other restaurant they want. But unfortunately, people do not have a choice in the jurisdiction that they're within and the help that they need to get from them. We're it. So if we're not striving to make that customer service as accessible as possible, as financially feasible as possible in our actions, our little day-to-day actions, like Rob is saying, don't let it get to the 10th plan check because that person's probably 100K in on that project at that point. And we spent a lot of money when maybe we could have fixed stuff way earlier on. People don't have another choice. We are it. So if you strive to be the best public servant that you can to folks and be as transparent as possible in describing how our processes work, the cost of that process, the fees that can come later on, like Rob was talking about earlier, that could kill a project, things on site that could kill a project, like I was describing, like blue line streams or sensitive habitats, things like that. If you are as transparent as you can possibly be the whole way, it goes a huge mile to making it feel like red tape is being cut because people are understanding what you're doing and why you're doing it. And you just want to, customer service it's our job, and it should be the best part of our job. And people are truly so grateful when you're just open and honest with them as much as you can be about what's going on, where their money is going, and why it's happening.
That's a great note to close on. So thank you, Kathleen. Thank you, Rob, again for joining us. Thank everybody. I want to thank everybody that joined us and that stayed on. I see a lot of people are still on, for joining us in this, and hopefully this was helpful and informative. We will be sending out, since we're running short of time, in respect of your time, we'll be sending out the survey via email. We will try to answer all the questions we have that we didn't answer by email and send that out to you all so that you guys can have those questions and answers. And we are recording this, so we will be posting this on the YouTube, the section's YouTube channel and our website, and we'll share the presentation as well. We will stay online maybe for a few more minutes and see if we can answer any questions that may be important to answer. If you'd like to stay on, you can stay on. If not, thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you at our next lunch and learn. Thank you
Yeah,
very
and if you're a new planner, feel free to add us on LinkedIn, ask us questions there too. If there's something that you would like help with, we're available for that. That's part of our customer service, is making our planners in the region better too. So feel free to reach out.
Exactly. Yes, please do. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
We'll see if folks stay on. And
Any last minute?
yeah, there was a question I wanted to. Oh, this is a good one. So I wanted to answer. So for those that do stay on, Kathleen, Rob, if you don't mind, the question is, any tips with dealing with difficult applicants?
Oh,
I wish I would have caught this one earlier on. Do you
yeah.
have any thoughts on that? I don't think any of us have dealt with difficult applicants, right?
No. Keep your senior staff involved. That's what happens, is it runs up a pipeline. So if someone is upset with you personally as the planner, they're gonna run it up the pipeline to someone else who can maybe do something about that. Don't have any fun surprises for your supervisors, your planning directors, your department managers, your city managers, whoever oversees you. If you are getting rude emails or calls or complaints from anyone about anything, don't keep your senior staff in the dark. Keep them looped in from the get-go, because they're gonna get that call, and you'd rather they know your side of the story before they say theirs.
Yeah, like
Definitely no surprises for your boss.
No surprises
That's
for
the
your
least thing you want. But yeah, no, and another thing that I would add is, I think, when going back to what we said before, communication is key. Sometimes I've had some agitated, angry applicants or applicants that are complicated. If you really sit down and explain to them what the problems are, what your expectations are, what the issues are, and what you need, and answer their questions and devote time to them, I'm pretty sure you could turn them around. I've done that myself. So try to do that and try to see if that helps. Applicants are difficult because they have a goal in mind, and if they see that they're not getting there, they will become difficult. But if you express to them that you're trying to get them there and you help them and you give them the resources, they may turn around.
Yeah, I think sometimes our applicants may think that, like, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and sometimes that's right. Sometimes they're gonna call you a lot, and so I'm fine if the calls are like constructional, like constructive, and like the conversations they're going well, and like we're having conversations. But if they start being like more aggressive, I think that's where it becomes an issue, and you could start talking to your management about it, because sometimes people do get very aggressive, and and yeah, you just it's always good to, it's a difficult conversation to have with people, but if they are getting aggressive, you may have to let them know that you have to keep the conversation professional.
Yes, definitely. Maybe just another one or two or a minute or two, or there's some folks online still. I saw a question in there specifically to grading plans and geotech reports and other technical reports, but is how would you explain to an applicant that they need specific types of professional drawn plans, reports, studies, and things of that nature, especially when they're on a budget? I run into a situation where we have this small mom and pop shop where they're trying to get some type of permit entitlement. They don't want to go spend thousands of dollars on a site plan, on elevations and things of that nature. So they try to draw it themselves. One of the things I like to tell them is, look, sometimes there's a saying in Spanish that sometimes the cheap things come out more expensive than doing it the right way. So just try to explain why you need it, what is needed, and where to get that information from, and how to do it may help. Again, guidance and assistance and customer service will go a long way to try to resolve that issue with the cost and the multiple plans that we require.
I think the thing too is that the unfortunate thing is that we're only as good as their engineers and architects allow us to be, which can always cause a lot of strife, especially if we're being scapegoated in some situations over certain corrections or things like that. But I always advise people when they're coming in before they even start their project to shop around. Cheapest does not always mean best, but also make sure you ask them if they've done work in your jurisdiction before. So always tell people who are starting, or if you already are seeing the difficulties from the get-go, if they're willing to listen, say, hey, maybe you should do some research and see if someone's done this type of entitlement in the county before, especially if it's something like for County of Riverside, if it's in wine country. We really want those people to find consultants that have done stuff in wine country, because there's so much emotion that goes into that jurisdiction. And so we want to make sure that whoever there is advising them can prepare them for that and can adequately prepare the documents that we need, because they're really specific for that area.
Yeah, and I think generally with all jurisdictions, you can't refer them to one person or one company, but you could refer them to a list of people. And so if your jurisdiction has something like that, helps.
Yeah, that's usually helpful, but not all jurisdictions have it. And unfortunately, as a public entity, we're not allowed to recommend a specific. We can have a list,
Yeah,
can choose, but so be careful with that. But yes, definitely a list would
yeah,
help. Have it, maybe refer them to another jurisdiction nearby that does have one, and they can look at that. Okay, in respect of my fellow panelists time, I would like to end this officially. For those that are online, we'd like to thank you for staying online. The true troopers, thank you for joining us. We'll go ahead and end the session, and you guys have a good afternoon.
Thank you all
Rob,
for
Kathleen,
joining. Yeah,
thank you very much.
all right, thank you.
yeah, thanks, Robert. Thank you, everyone.
Do you want us to hang back, Robert?
Yes, please.